The bride froze mid-toast, letter in hand. Her mother had just disinherited her. Across the room, June raised her glass. Calm. Uninvited to speak, but impossible to ignore. "You gave this to the planner?" Lauren spat. "I didn't want to interrupt your moment," her mother said. Guests stared. The mother of the bride had come dressed in black, with a lawyer. And she brought receipts no one could delete. "All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from." She said blush, ivory, and champagne, but not black, and not me. The envelope was thick, creamy, and hand-addressed in looping gold script. "Lauren Elise Whitmore and Thomas James Carter cordially invite you." June's name had been printed beneath in a smaller, blockier font. No mother of the bride, no honorific, just June Whitmore, as if she were a distant acquaintance, the kind that gets invited out of guilt or formality. She opened the trifold insert and read it once without blinking. Then again, her name was there under the RSVP line, just below non-family guests. The soft hum of her dishwasher filled the silence. She sat at the marble island, smoothing the invitation flat with both hands like she was ironing out disbelief. Her phone buzzed. "Lauren." "Hi, Mom." Her daughter's voice was bright, brittle, like a champagne glass already halfway cracked. "Did you get the invite?" June inhaled slowly. "I did." There was a pause. Then Lauren filled it. "So, the seating chart is really tight, and the aesthetic is very curated. Blush, ivory, champagne, cohesive. So, I hope it's okay, but you're listed in the outer rows. It just looks better in photos when the palette flows. No dark colors, no contrasts. No, well, black." June said nothing. Lauren laughed nervously. "You know how it is. Everything's on film now." "Yes," June said. Her voice was even, so even it felt like glass, smooth, cold, waiting to shatter. "I know how it is. Oh, and don't feel obligated to bring a date. It's going to be really intimate. Less stress, right?" Another pause. June finally spoke. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll RSVP." She ended the call gently, placing the phone down like it might bruise. Then, with precise, unhurried motion, she opened the side drawer and pulled out a worn leather folder. The corners were frayed, the spine cracked, Robert Whitmore Estate embossed in faded gold. She laid it beside the invitation. 2 documents, one elegant and one legal, one exclusionary, one binding. She turned to the 3rd page of the will, trust clauses. Her finger paused midway down, tapping a specific paragraph she had nearly forgotten. Disbursement for direct descendants contingent upon good faith standing and family integrity, as determined by the executor. Her late husband had been meticulous, conservative with emotion, liberal with structure. June had been named sole executor with discretionary oversight. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. She did now. The dishwasher beeped its finish. Steam curled out into the kitchen, fogging the glass over the cabinets. June stood slowly, walked across the room, and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands didn't shake. From the corner of the room, Robert's watch ticked on the mantel. Precise, dependable, inherited. She sat down again, angled the will beneath the kitchen light, and circled the clause with a ballpoint pen. Not hard, just enough to mark intention. Her phone was already unlocked before she realized what she was doing. She scrolled through her contacts and tapped the name, Grant and Ellison LLP. A male voice answered, "Charles Grant's office." June didn't hesitate. "This is June Whitmore. I need to speak with your partner about a family trust. It's time-sensitive." "Yes, of course, Mrs. Whitmore. Is this regarding the Whitmore estate?" "It is," she said, folding the invitation in half without looking at it. "Tell him it concerns integrity." She circles one clause and places a call. "I need to speak with your partner about a family trust." They wanted clean lines, soft neutrals, and no wrinkles in the guest list. The seating chart was shaped like a tree. Elegant branches of names stretched out from a central trunk, Lauren and Thomas, etched in calligraphy. Gold ink danced across cream cardstock, a printout taped neatly inside a clear acrylic display framed in eucalyptus and baby's breath. June found her name near the bottom. Row J, Table 14. Between Margot Ellis, Bridge Club, and Kenna Dwyer, groom's family, twice removed. She stared at it as if trying to decipher a foreign language. Then, slowly, she stepped back, letting a younger couple snap a photo of the chart with their phones, squealing softly at how Pinterest-worthy it all was. The venue smelled like lavender and budget ambition, too much diffused candlelight and not enough warmth. The wedding planner brushed past her with a clipboard and headset, barking into a mic about the canapé delay. No one acknowledged her presence. She walked to a quieter corner near the bar, hearing the scrape of high heels on marble and the low hum of curated playlists. Lauren's voice echoed from across the room, brighter than it was warm. "She's definitely coming," someone said. "I saw her name on the list." Then, laughter. June's phone buzzed. A notification from TikTok, though she hadn't opened the app in months. The video auto-played. Lauren's maid of honor, Ava, beaming in a matching silk robe. "Here's how we're keeping the vibe clean and neutral, okay? No drama, just elegance. No +1s unless approved. No last-minute outfit surprises. No moments, if you know what I mean." Behind her, Lauren sipped champagne and mouthed, "No moments," with a wink. They both laughed. June hit mute. She stared at her reflection in the black screen. Neatly combed silver hair, pressed blouse, a face too composed to be fragile. She set the phone down and reached for her glass of water. Her fingers trembled, just slightly, against the condensation. She didn't speak to anyone as she left. The next morning, June stood in her bedroom, sunlight sliding in through sheer curtains. She laid 3 dresses across the bed, navy crepe, lavender chiffon, and a structured ivory gown she wore once to a gala. Then she opened her laptop. The cursor blinked in the search bar like a dare. She typed slowly. Black silk sheath dress, tailored, floor length. One dress caught her eye immediately. Fitted, high neck, slit just high enough to make the statement. It wasn't loud, it was deliberate. The kind of dress you wore when you refused to disappear. She clicked buy now without reading the reviews. That evening, Charles called. His voice was measured but alert. "I've reviewed the clause," he said. "Your authority as executor allows some discretion in asset oversight, especially under terms of misrepresentation or misallocation. It's unusually broad, actually." "Robert always liked leverage," June replied. Charles chuckled softly. "Then you'll appreciate this. There are direct transfers from the estate account to the wedding vendor holdings. She's claiming the groom's side funded the event, but that's not accurate." "How much?" "Just under $48,000. June didn't gasp. She didn't raise her voice. She just clicked her pen and began a new page in her notepad. "What are you thinking?" Charles asked, more curious than concerned. "I'm thinking the guest list should be revised," she said. She opened the RSVP form she'd left half-filled on the kitchen counter, checked accepts with pleasure, and then, where the line read, +1, name, she wrote in clear, steady script, Charles D. Grant, Esca. She adds 1 name to the RSVP, +1 Charles D. Grant, Esq. They used to ask what flowers I liked. Now they ask if I can step out of frame. The roses were imported. You could smell the money on them. Sugar-white blooms nestled beside peonies the color of diluted blush. They lined every table, trailed down every staircase. Centerpieces stood tall and glassy like ice sculptures that wouldn't melt. It was the kind of floral arrangement that whispered opulence but screamed, "Don't touch." June stepped through the doors of the pre-wedding brunch in a slate gray coat, her heels silent against the stone floor. Her black clutch hung at her side like a quiet declaration. "Welcome," chirped a clipboard woman in kitten heels and a headset. Her eyes swept June's coat, paused on the gray silk blouse beneath. Then she smiled the way some people do when they're trying not to wince. "Name?" "June Whitmore." "Oh, Lauren's mom." The woman's voice lifted an octave but not with warmth, more like performance. "You're not on the group photo list. Do you mind standing off to the side during the roundups?" June tilted her head slightly. "Not at all." She walked past the planners, arranging mimosas in tiered pyramids, and entered the courtyard, where cameras snapped like insects. Bridesmaids in matching pastel jumpsuits were mid-laugh, half-posed, half-tipsy. Lauren stood near a floral arch, holding a glass of sparkling rosé and talking to the photographer. Her daughter caught sight of June. A smile flickered across her face, small and uncertain, before she turned back to the camera. June didn't approach. She wasn't invited into the frame. She simply kept walking. The sunlight was too perfect, like it had been filtered through Instagram presets. It made everything feel a little artificial, too soft, too staged, like a memory rehearsed before it had a chance to happen. June spotted Eleanor, her late husband's sister, near the mimosa bar, sipping orange juice straight without the Prosecco. A sensible woman in tan flats and a trench coat that looked lived in. "Eleanor," June greeted. Eleanor leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. "You look elegant," which is probably why no one knows where to put you. June gave a quiet smile. "I believe they're trying not to." Eleanor lowered her voice. "You're being erased in real time." It wasn't bitter. It was observant. Like Eleanor had seen it happen before, to other women, in other rooms, behind other perfectly arranged centerpieces. A photographer swept past them with 2 assistants. "Bridesmaids only for the next shot, thanks." June stepped back. She'd never felt shorter in her life. The walls were draped in gauzy white linen, hiding the venue's bones, the kind of elegance that didn't remember its own cost. She turned from the crowd and walked toward the back garden. Her heels crunched on gravel as she wandered down a path flanked with rose petals and antique lanterns. A table waited at the end, wooden, rustic, curated, lined with a photo display titled "Moments That Made Us." Frames of all sizes stood layered and overlapping like they'd been collected from loving addicts. Lauren as a child, toothless and smiling, being lifted by her father. Lauren in a high school play, surrounded by friends. College graduation, Lauren and Thomas on a ski trip, baby photos, bridal shower. June leaned closer. She wasn't in a single one. Not the holidays, not the vacations, not even the hospital photo the day Lauren was born, cropped just enough to exclude the woman holding her. For a long minute, June stood motionless. The breeze shifted faintly, carrying the scent of citrus and lavender. Somewhere, silverware clinked against glass. She reached for one of the frames, a small one in the corner that looked like it had been added last. It held a print of Lauren and Robert, father and daughter, seated beside a lake. The kind of candid moment June had taken herself. She remembered that day. The sunlight had hit just right. She'd handed Lauren her father's hat after the photo. Her hand moved to her phone, almost automatically. She wasn't going to say anything, but a new message had arrived. Charles D. Grant, Esquire, one new message. Found something. Need to show you in person. Timing may matter. June looked up at the display again. Her reflection glinted faintly in the glass of the frame, just the outline of her face behind a photo she hadn't been included in. She didn't flinch. She put the phone away, turned from the table, and began walking back through the sea of florals and fakeness. She receives a text from her lawyer. Found something. She said they paid for everything. The ledger says otherwise. The USB drive was small, silver, unmarked, silent. Charles slid it across the cafe table like it contained state secrets. No folder, no paper trail. Just that metallic sliver between the salt shaker and a half-finished cappuccino. June didn't reach for it. Not yet. She made a lot of claims, Charles said, voice low, careful. But the math is louder. They sat at a corner table in a tucked-away coffee shop downtown. Exposed brick, hushed jazz, the clink of dishes against porcelain. June had chosen it deliberately. Neutral ground, quiet ambience, no chance of being spotted by floral bridesmaids or TikTok influencers. Charles opened his laptop and tapped a few keys. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet, rows of numbers, vendors, and dates, line after line of expenses, florists, photographers, venue deposits. June leaned forward. Show me the source. He scrolled down to a tab labeled Trust Transfers. Several entries stood out, highlighted in amber. January 14th, Willow and Sage Events, $8,200. February 1st. Lovell and Vine Catering, $12,500. February 14th. Paper and Script Invites, $3,750. 0303. White Lilac Rentals, $6,000. 0318. Casa Belviere, Venue Deposit, $17,450. Total, $47,900, all paid directly from the Whitmore family estate account. June's eyes followed the trail like it was a story unfolding line by line. Lauren had told guests and the groom's family that everything had been handled by Thomas's side. June remembered the casual laugh, the dismissive shrug. Oh, Tom's parents insisted. Old money, you know how they are. But the ledger didn't lie. They didn't just hide it, Charles said. They rewrote it entirely. June nodded slowly, lips pressed into a line. I assume you'd like to keep this private for now, he added. She finally picked up the USB. Its cold metal stung slightly against her skin. For now, she replied. The air smelled of espresso and cinnamon, but it felt sterile now, like the warmth had drained out of the room the second truth arrived. Charles closed the laptop. You're unusually calm. Because emotion is expensive, June said softly, and right now, I'm conserving. She tucked the USB into her clutch, next to a tube of lipstick and a vintage silver pen. The clutch clicked shut like punctuation. You're not reacting like someone who's just been stolen from, Charles said, studying her face. June turned to the window, watching pedestrians move through sunlit streets, unaware of what it costs to be made invisible. I'm not reacting, she murmured, like someone surprised. They stood. Charles offered to walk her to the car, but she waved him off. She needed the air, needed the walk. Back home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only builds in rooms once filled with the certainty of someone else's footsteps. June took off her coat, set her clutch down, and walked to the study. She unlocked the drawer where Robert's legal files were stored and pulled out a fresh folder, labeled it herself in blue ink, Family Misuse of Inheritance, Internal Record, Confidential. Inside, she began building, printouts, copied transfers, dates, dollar signs, nothing vindictive, just facts. Weighty, undeniable, numbered facts. She added one more thing, a photo. Not from the brunch, not from the board. A different one. A photo of Lauren and Robert printed from an old digital file. June was the one behind the camera that day, too. She slid it into the folder's front pocket, then sat back and stared at the label for a long time. The silence in the room shifted. Less emptiness now, more tension. Like the air was holding its breath. She clicked her pen once and set it down on the folder, then stood, smoothed her blouse and walked into the kitchen like the world hadn't just tilted slightly. She quietly drafts a financial summary labeled Family Misuse of Inheritance. She told me what not to wear. I decided who wouldn't inherit. The dress arrived in a long black garment bag, delivered not by a carrier, but by a man in a pressed suit with a soft accent who called her ma'am twice and refused to set it down anywhere but directly into her hands. June thanked him, closed the door gently, and carried it upstairs in silence. The house felt different today. Charged, like it had overheard something, like it had questions. She laid the bag across the bed, unzipped it slowly. The silk was darker than ink, heavier than air. It shimmered faintly in the afternoon light, cool to the touch and unapologetically deliberate. A dress meant to be remembered, not approved of. She stood before the mirror, holding it up. No frills, no lace, just sleek lines, quiet strength, and something undeniably final. In the background, her printer hummed to life. The trust documents were already loaded. Charles had emailed her the editable version earlier that morning with the subject line, as discussed, clean slate, attached, a revised estate plan that removed Lauren as executor and primary heir, redirecting a sizable portion into a new foundation. The foundation's name had been June's choice, the Robert Whitmore Fund for Legacy Integrity. A mouthful, perhaps, but purposefully so. The kind of name that didn't bend under scrutiny. She walked to the printer, collected the freshly printed pages. The smell of ink clung to them, sharp and new. She skimmed the lines, every word now hers to command. Where Lauren's name once appeared, a blank space lived, an absence that felt like truth. June sat down at her writing desk, tucked the stack into a black leather folder. Beside it, she placed a note card with the Foundation's mission statement: to honor the values of legacy, stewardship, and quiet power. She had underlined quiet power twice. On impulse, she pulled out her own will from the drawer. The original was yellowing, softened at the edges by time and compromise. She struck Lauren's name through with one clean line of the pen. Then, almost ceremoniously, she retrieved a new black clutch, sleek, rectangular, impossibly elegant. She had ordered it from the same boutique as the dress, not just for style, for symbolism. She opened the clutch and carefully slid in the updated trust packet. One folder, one future, one decision that couldn't be undone once revealed. That evening, the sky outside turned the color of pewter, the kind of overcast hush that warned rain but never quite delivered. June moved through her kitchen like she was setting a scene, tea steeping, lights dimmed, a record turning low in the background, piano, old and unresolved. The phone rang. Charles. She picked up. Yes? It's done, he said. Filed. Backdated to match the oversight date from the initial clause. Does she know? Number not, unless you tell her. A beat. But if you present it, it's ironclad, legally airtight. If challenged, it won't hold in court, not even for optics. June didn't answer immediately. She traced the rim of her teacup with one finger, the ceramic warm beneath her touch. I'm not doing this to make a scene, she said finally. I know. I'm doing this to make sure I'm not edited out of the truth. Another pause. June, Charles said gently, you're not in the background anymore. You're the executor, in every sense of the word. She let that land. The record skipped softly, an old jazz solo repeating one melancholy bar. She walked to the dining room, set the black clutch in the center of the table, and stared at it like it might speak. Not yet, but soon. Charles confirms, it's ironclad. If presented, it's final. They used my wedding china and pretended I was a neighbor. June stopped mid-step when she saw it. Her wedding teacup, porcelain white, rimmed, in faded gold etched with tiny forget-me-nots, no bigger than a fingernail. It was placed just so on a mahogany dessert table beside a cut crystal cake stand and pastel macarons. A decorative accent, not a memory. Her breath caught in her chest, not from sentiment, but from the insult of recognition without acknowledgement. That china had once been boxed in a cedar cabinet, used only on holidays, handed down from her grandmother. Robert had insisted they include it in their wedding reception. He'd said it made the table feel like family. Now it had been plucked from meaning and repurposed as an accessory. No credit, no note, not even a nod, just part of the look. Guests wandered past it, commenting on how vintage and curated everything felt. One woman held her phone up to film a slow pan of the dessert display. "This is giving Jane Austen at a vineyard," she whispered to her friend. June didn't speak, didn't move. Only her fingers twitched slightly at her side. At the corner of the table sat a small placard, "Tea and Sweet Things," inspired by timeless charm. Inspired, not inherited, certainly not acknowledged. She walked slowly through the hall, eyes scanning each surface like a forensic expert in heels. Her silver hair was pulled into a low chignon, her black clutch firm beneath her arm. No one stopped her, no one greeted her. She could have been a distant aunt or a donor or a decorator. Nothing that left fingerprints. A bridesmaid brushed past her, nearly colliding. "Sorry. Oh, hi." The girl glanced at her vaguely, recognition failing to land. "You must be from Thomas's side?" June smiled politely. "Apparently." She reached the gift table near the foyer. Among the cards and pale ribbon-wrapped boxes, a stack of thank you notes sat pre-printed, impersonal. She found her own. "Dear guest," it began, "your contribution to our special day helped bring our dream aesthetic to life. No name, no signature, no warmth, Just branding. Her jaw tensed. She slipped the card back into its envelope like she might be sealing a wound shut. Then her phone vibrated in her clutch. A message from Charles, short and without pleasantries. "You were right to act when you did. Things are moving. More soon." June didn't reply. Instead, she made her way to the hallway behind the bar, quieter, shadowed, away from the photographer's circuit. From her clutch, she pulled a narrow envelope containing a photo she'd printed the day before. Her own wedding, 1979. She and Robert smiling behind the very same china, her bouquet a match for the table flowers used here. Peonies, lilac, forget-me-nots. She looked at the vintage teacup one last time, then carefully slipped it into a padded pouch and lowered it into her briefcase. Not stolen, reclaimed. That piece of history belonged to someone who remembered why it mattered. She closed the clasp slowly. The lock clicked. As she turned to leave, she passed a group of guests chatting by the window. One of them, an older woman in designer sunglasses, leaned in and said, "Everything looks so timeless. You'd think it came from a museum." June kept walking, but her silence crackled louder than applause. She adds an item to her briefcase, a vintage teacup, photo attached. "She didn't ask if I had something to wear. I did. It fit better than silence." June stepped barefoot onto the cool floorboards of her bedroom, the garment bag open like a secret finally spoken aloud. The black silk dress lay across her arm, fluid as ink, waiting. Outside, the late afternoon light filtered through gauzy curtains, golden, quiet, indifferent, the kind of light that flatters everything, even grief. She stepped into the dress with care, the fabric whispering against her skin like a promise. "You're not invisible." It slid over her body like it had been made from memory, tailored to who she was now, not who anyone expected her to be. No zippers snagged, no seams pulled. It fit. Perfectly. She walked slowly to the standing mirror, her bare feet silent against the wood. Her reflection met her, elegant, composed, and sharp around the edges. The black of the dress drank the light, turned her into something sculpted. She practiced a smile, not soft or polite, one that said, "I know everything I need to know, and I'm still standing here." Then she tried another, smaller, one that didn't reach her eyes. She lowered her arms. The silence in the house was absolute. Robert's watch ticked faintly in the other room, a sound she'd grown to rely on. Proof that something still moved forward. She crossed to her dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside was the black clutch, sleek, structured, no embellishment. She placed it gently on the bed, then opened it to check the contents again. Trust documents, sealed and signed, a photo of the teacup, a folded copy of the updated will, a printout of her original wedding china's provenance, just in case. She closed it with a soft snap. The weight of it in her hand felt right, like a verdict with velvet trim. Her phone buzzed. "Charles D. Grant, Esquire, one new message. Tomorrow's delivery is scheduled. It will arrive before the ceremony." She stared at the message for a moment, then reread it. Delivery. Not just documents, not just legality. Delivery. Final. She placed the phone beside the clutch and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, she allowed herself stillness, not sadness, something older, the bone-deep quiet that comes after you stop waiting for someone to apologize. On the nightstand, a photo faced away from the bed. She turned it toward her. Robert, young and alive, smiling in a navy tux. His arm was around her, both of them mid-laugh, caught off guard. The joy in that photo had been unedited, uncurated. Messy hair, crooked boutonniere, her lipstick slightly smudged. They'd kept that one in a drawer, not because it wasn't perfect, but because it didn't need to be shown to anyone to prove it had mattered. She pressed a thumb lightly against the glass. Then the front gate buzzed. A second package. Unexpected. She moved downstairs, opened the door. A man in a white shirt and vest stood there, holding a long white box tied with gray ribbon. "Delivery for June Whitmore," he said. She frowned. "From where?" He checked the slip. "No sender, just says, for the weekend's aesthetic." She accepted it without a word, brought it inside and opened it at the kitchen island. Inside, a pale mauve shawl, delicate and soft, with a note on embossed cardstock. Thought you might need something that matches better. Love, Lauren. No signature, no warmth, no mention of the dress code Lauren had imposed weeks ago. June folded the shawl neatly and placed it back in the box. Then she walked it straight to the fireplace and set it beside the kindling. She didn't light it. Not yet. But the matchbook sat on the mantel, waiting. Charles sends a final message. Tomorrow's delivery is scheduled. They told me where to stand. I stood for something else. The courtyard was lit in strings of warm light, each bulb hanging like a little sun, trying too hard to make the night feel intimate. Laughter echoed off stone walls, softened with ivy and intention. Glasses clinked, forks scraped plates. Everything was curated, even the shadows. June arrived alone. She wore the black dress, not funereal, not flamboyant, final. As she stepped into the rehearsal dinner, a planner with a headset intercepted her like a bouncer. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, clipboard clutched tight, "we have you at table 8, near the terrace, gorgeous view of the fountain. Not near the family, not near Lauren, just near the view." June smiled faintly. How poetic. The planner didn't know how to respond. She gestured down a stone path lined with lanterns, then vanished into her earpiece. Table 8 sat in semi-isolation, with a distant view of the sweetheart table adorned in blush linens and arrangements of overhydrated roses. A few guests nearby offered polite nods, unsure of her title or placement. June returned each with a measured smile. Her placecard read simply, "June Whitmore." No mother of the bride. No role at all. Across the courtyard, the photographer moved like a shadow, camera clicking in bursts, directing groupings with military precision. "Groom's side first. Parents, please. Yes, right there. Closer together. Smile like you believe it." Then, "Bridal party. Everyone under the arch. Let's get one with the bride and both moms." June stood, already walking forward. The photographer turned. "Mother of the bride?" Before she could answer, Lauren cut in. "Oh, she's just here for support. Let's keep this one tight." The photographer nodded, adjusting her lens. June paused, just short of the frame. One foot on the flagstone, one still in the grass. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply turned and stepped back. As the shutter clicked, June walked past the outer ring of tables, her heels muted by the ground. She could hear Lauren laughing behind her, forced, a little sharp, the kind of laugh that needed witnesses. She kept walking. At the edge of the courtyard stood a catering cart, unattended. On it, the photographer's clipboard, abandoned during a lens change. June glanced once around her. No one was watching. She stepped closer, lifted the top page, a detailed shoot list. Groupings: bride plus groom, bride plus groom's family, bride plus groom, plus mom, TJC, bride plus groom, plus dad, JW, deceased, use photo insert, bride plus bridal party, groom plus groomsmen, bride plus flower girls, bride alone, groom alone, grandparents, if applicable. Not included, mother of the bride. June stared at it. The ink looked fresh. The omission wasn't a mistake. She reached into her clutch, pulled out her phone, and snapped a photo. Not because she needed proof, because paper burns. Phones don't forget. She slid the clipboard back exactly as she'd found it and turned toward the garden wall, stepping into the shadows like she'd been rehearsing it. Behind her, someone called for another toast. She didn't turn around. She checked her photo once. It was clear, sharp, legible. She locked her screen and let the silence inside her settle, a heavy, knowing silence. Not absence, but the weight of something forming. And then her phone buzzed again. A notification. No name. Just a delivery alert. Confirmed. 8 a.m. drop. Item sealed. Handoff requested. June exhaled. Timing, she thought. Tomorrow they wouldn't get to decide where she stood. She takes a photo of the photographer's clipboard. No one noticed my dress. They noticed my guest. The car rolled to a stop at the edge of the vineyard, tires crunching over gravel with a sound like slow applause. Morning mist still clung to the rows of grapevines, curling around them like breath not yet exhaled. The sun hadn't fully committed, just a thin veil of gold, softening the edges of everything except what mattered. The back door opened, and June stepped out. Black silk, black clutch, shoulders back, chin high, not defiant, deliberate. A hush passed over the gathered crowd, though no one said anything aloud. Conversations thinned like mist. Eyes flicked toward her, then away, then back again. She could feel the murmurs before she heard them, but it wasn't the dress they noticed. It was the man who stepped out behind her, Charles D. Grant, escaros, tailored navy suit, silver tie, briefcase in hand, expression carved from marble and law, no smile, no performance, just presence. The two of them walked side by side, quiet and composed, like the lead characters in a scene the rest of the cast wasn't aware they were in. "Is that her lawyer? I thought he couldn't make it. Wait, is something going on?" The whispers came like insect wings, soft, persistent, and impossible to swat away. They approached the check-in arch where a young coordinator stood with a tablet, smile polished and clueless. Her eyes darted from June to Charles. "Name?" she asked automatically. "June Whitmore," June said calmly. The woman blinked. "Oh, yes, table 9. June didn't correct her. Charles placed a hand lightly on her back. "Let's continue." As they walked down the stone path toward the ceremony lawn, guests shifted in their seats. A bridesmaid nudged another. A groomsman checked his phone. Two of Thomas's aunts exchanged looks that weren't subtle, and then Lauren saw her. She was already standing at the altar, bouquet in hand, the veil pushed back to show a face that had been professionally softened by makeup and filtered optimism. Her smile faltered. Her eyes dropped to the man walking beside June, and her lips tightened. Not confusion, recognition. Charles gave her a single nod, polite but unreadable. Lauren turned back toward the officiant, but her fingers adjusted the bouquet 3 times in 30 seconds. The guests were seated. Music swelled. The ceremony began. June sat near the back, still and silent. She didn't crane her neck or dab her eyes. She didn't pretend. She simply watched, like someone bearing witness, not participating. When the vows ended and the crowd erupted into polite applause, June clapped once, soft but real. Charles leaned slightly toward her. "She saw the briefcase," he murmured. "She knows what's inside," June replied. The recessional music started, light, floral, too cheerful to be remembered. Guests rose and funneled toward the reception tent where champagne was already being passed. Charles straightened his cuffs. "Time? Now," June said. They walked slowly across the lawn, down the back path that led toward the vendor prep area. Servers bustled, planners shouted into radios. A photographer darted between trees, shooting candid laughter like it was currency. And near the corner, flipping through a binder while sipping iced coffee, stood the wedding planner. She spotted them and immediately straightened. "Oh, hi. Do you need something?" Charles opened his briefcase, pulled out a white envelope sealed with a thin band of navy ribbon. Elegant, understated, unmistakably legal. He handed it to her. "Please ensure the bride receives this privately, before dinner service." The planner took it hesitantly. "And, may I ask what this is?" Charles smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "A revision." Charles hands an envelope to the wedding planner. "She toasted her future. I delivered her past." The champagne flutes sparkled under chandeliers strung like constellations across the tented sky. Each table was a still life, crystal, ivory, blush. Napkins folded like origami, candles lit but untouched, flames motionless in the still air. Too perfect, like everything had been sprayed in place. A coordinator whispered into her earpiece near the sweetheart table. "Speeches in 5, brides up last." At table 9, June sat with her back straight, black silk pooling at her ankles, one hand resting on her clutch like a quiet animal waiting to move. Charles sat beside her, legs crossed, fingers laced, face unreadable. Lauren rose from the head table, glass in hand, her posture crisp beneath the lace of her second gown, this one champagne-colored, layered with organza. Her smile was wide, but it didn't reach her eyes. She wasn't looking at June. She was scanning the room for the planner. June's eyes found her before Lauren's did. The planner moved discreetly from the back of the tent, weaving past guests, a sealed envelope clutched in her hand. She reached Lauren just as the first speaker, a groomsman, was finishing a poorly rehearsed toast about finding your person. Lauren leaned in, took the envelope with a smile too sharp, and nodded like it was just another form to file. She hadn't seen the ribbon, or the seal. Not yet. June watched her daughter's fingers hover over the edge. She didn't open it, not right away. Instead, she handed it to a nearby assistant and stood with her glass held high, signaling her turn. The tent dimmed slightly as music faded into silence. All eyes turned toward the bride. Lauren's voice rang clear and practiced. "I've always believed in beauty," she began. "In intention. In building a life that feels as good as it looks. That's what today is for me. The start of something elegant and lasting." June sipped her water, her expression neutral. Lauren continued, her voice climbing gently. "I've had the privilege of growing up with an example of strength. Quiet strength. The kind you don't always notice until you realize it was holding everything together." A few guests turned toward June, unsure if this was a nod to her or to someone abstract. June gave no indication either way. "I want to thank everyone who made today possible," Lauren said, voice softening. "Especially those who gave so much, emotionally, financially, generously." She glanced at the envelope on the table now, unopened. Her hand moved toward it. "And I hope," she added, "that we continue to honor the people who shaped us by becoming better than the stories we came from." She reached for the envelope now, as if it were part of her performance. The seal broke with a soft snap. She read the first line. Her face didn't fall. It froze. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed back together. She didn't turn the page. She didn't look at June. She sat. The microphone was still in her hand, her speech still folded. There was a long pause before anyone moved. A groomsman coughed. Someone clinked a fork against glass, unsure of whether to applaud or wait. Lauren slowly lowered the mic to the table. Charles leaned slightly toward June. "She won't finish it." "No," June murmured. "She already did." Lauren stared at the page in front of her like it had written her out of her own story. The new estate directive was short, sharp, and complete. An itemized list of asset retractions, inheritance revisions, and a footnote about foundation redirection. There were no threats, just finalities. The next toast resumed awkwardly from a cousin who clearly hadn't been briefed. Glasses raised, plates shifted, but Lauren didn't speak again. Lauren opens it, goes pale, sits back down without reading her speech. "She edited me out. I untagged her from the inheritance." The call came just after dessert was cleared. "Photos behind the tent!" a planner shouted, clipboard aloft like a flag. "Family first!" Chairs scraped. Guests rose in waves. Laughter spilled outward as everyone followed directions like extras in a commercial, one curated scene after another. June remained seated. She watched the procession of pastels and pocket squares gather beneath the flowering arch, a sea of champagne tones against a backdrop of manicured trees. A white love seat was brought out and fluffed by a frantic assistant. "Immediate family!" someone called. Lauren stood at the center, bouquet switched out for a hand pose, veil draped artfully to one side. She was flanked by Thomas, her new in-laws, bridesmaids, and her father's brother. No one looked toward June. Except Eleanor. She lingered back, arms crossed, shoes already kicked off under the table. When the photographer called again, "Mother of the bride?" There was a pause. Lauren glanced toward the empty space beside her, then smiled at the photographer and said, "Let's just do the women." It wasn't said cruelly. That was the trick of it. It was said like she was brushing lint from her sleeve. June stood slowly, adjusting her clutch beneath her arm. She made no move to approach. Instead, she walked toward the rear of the tent, past the empty cake table, past the floral arch no longer being photographed. The laughter behind her faded, replaced by the rustle of wind through trees, the hum of distant generators, and birds debating overhead like jurors still in deliberation. Eleanor followed, phone in hand. "You okay?" she asked. June turned slightly. "Would it matter if I wasn't?" Eleanor shrugged. Not to her, but to me. They reached a small gravel path lined with low garden beds, flowers heavy with heat and scent, lavender, rosemary, sweet pea. Bees hummed lazily near. A stone bench tucked beneath an arbor. June stopped there. The black dress glowed faintly in the waning light, catching hints of blue in the silk. She stood straight, the clutch still in hand, her earrings the only movement as the breeze lifted her hair. Eleanor raised her phone. "Mind if I get one for me?" June nodded once. The shutter clicked. Once. Then again. "Got it." She didn't pose. She didn't smile. She just stood. Eleanor looked at the photo and exhaled. "Well, damn, that's power." "Send it to me," June said. Eleanor did. Then, without warning, Eleanor opened Instagram, tapped a few buttons, uploaded the photo, caption, "The woman who paid for the day and kept the receipt. Legacy matters. Know your worth. Real matriarch. No tags, no drama, just facts." The post went up at 6:12 p.m. By 6:45, it had 27 shares. By 7 o'clock, 2 of Lauren's cousins had liked it. By 7:03, Lauren unfollowed Eleanor. And June. And her father's side of the family. Across the tent, June returned to her table. She didn't check her phone again. She didn't need to. The air had changed. Subtle, but sharp. Like citrus just after the peel breaks. She sat quietly, accepting a coffee refill from a passing server. The ceremony was over, but something new had begun. Not chaos, not confrontation. Recalibration. Behind her, the photographer directed one last group. "Bride with extended family." No one called her name. She stirred cream into her coffee, eyes on the swirl, steady and smooth. And then, her phone vibrated once. Notification: "Your photo was shared by @WomenInWills." Caption: "Power isn't loud. Sometimes it just doesn't flinch." Post quietly goes viral. Bride unfollows 3 relatives. They told one version. People started asking about the missing chapters. The photo was supposed to be a quiet post. A whisper, not a headline. But by Sunday morning, it was an echo chamber. The image, June, standing alone in a black silk dress under a garden arbor, had spread across accounts like a quiet act of rebellion. No hashtags had trended, but the reposts told the story anyway. A woman, dignified and removed, flanked by nothing but lavender and restraint. The comments came in waves. "She doesn't look like a guest. She looks like the reason the lights are still on." "Wait, is this the mother of the bride? Why is she in the back? Check the county clerk filings. She's the estate executor. The venue deposit's in her name. She looks like she paid for the day and then paid again in silence. Can someone explain how someone this central is treated like a prop?" By noon, the post had landed on a niche but influential Instagram page, @WomenInWills, an account known for sharing stories of matriarchal power, inheritance drama, and quiet legal victories. They captioned it simply, "Aesthetic versus actual, no mother not guest." That's when things shifted. Screenshots of Lauren's TikToks resurfaced. No drama, just elegance, now stripped of context and recirculated with new meaning. Side-by-sides popped up, the wedding photo board where June had been erased, placed next to the viral image of her standing alone, black against blush, reality against revision. The more curated the wedding content appeared, the more artificial it felt in contrast. And June? She didn't post. She didn't speak. She brewed tea, watched the wind flatten the hydrangeas outside her kitchen window, and turned her phone screen down while the notifications pulsed. By late afternoon, Eleanor called. "You've gone semi-viral," she said, chewing something into the receiver. "Not full Taylor Swift, but definitely enough to get unfollowed by at least one cousin and a Pilates instructor." June smiled faintly. "Let me know if any bishops chime in." "Oh, and," Eleanor added, "there's a journalist who DM'd me, wants to speak to you, says she's with The Ledger, some series they're doing, narratives and nuptials. She thinks there's a bigger story here. I told her I'd pass it along." June didn't respond immediately. She reached for the folded wedding program still on her counter. It smelled faintly of lavender, of what people think legacy should smell like. "I thought I was finished," she murmured. "Maybe you are," Eleanor said. "Or maybe you're just done being quiet." June hung up gently. No drama. Just decision. She opened her phone, scrolled through the posts, read the threads she hadn't asked to be part of. There it was again, beneath one of the reposted images. "She looks like the story they edited out." Then, a direct message request slid across her screen. "Cora Lee, investigative reporter, the Ledger High Mrs. Whitmore. I'd love to speak with you. I think your perspective deserves a wider audience. What they chose to show doesn't seem to match what actually happened. Would you be open to an interview?" Title: Aesthetic versus Actual. June stared at the message. The cursor blinked in the reply box like it was breathing. She reached for her black clutch, pulled out the original progra. Insert: the guest list. Her name still sat under non-family. She folded it once and again, then placed it beside the phone. Then she typed one line. "Let's talk. I'm ready." A journalist reaches out asking for an interview. Aesthetic versus actual? She said I embarrassed her. I say I invested in truth. The summons arrived not with ceremony, but with an envelope slipped through the mail slot. White, rigid, embossed in cold, legal black. June stared at it on the tile floor for a long time before bending to pick it up. Whitmore v. Whitmore. Petition for emergency estate review. She opened it carefully, hands steady. Inside, a legal motion filed by Lauren citing intentional mismanagement of inheritance, emotional distress, and, most pointedly, unauthorized reallocation of legacy assets. It wasn't surprising, but it was still a choice. Charles came over that afternoon. He didn't knock. He knew better. She had coffee waiting, dark roast, sharp and black. "Her attorney's a reputation fixer," he said, skimming the pages. "One of those who tries to turn optics into argument. The claim's weak, emotionally charged, not procedurally grounded, but they're banking on public fallout." June said nothing for a long while. Then, finally, "Let them bank on silence. It doesn't pay what they think it does." The courtroom smelled of varnished wood, recycled air, and quiet consequences. Lauren wore beige, not blush, not ivory, beige, safe. Her lips were tight, her chin high, her hair twisted into a style that wanted to whisper respectable louder than anything else. She didn't look at June, not once, but June looked at her daughter the way architects study cracked foundations, not with anger, but understanding. This could have held, but something was hollowed out early. Charles stood and spoke like a scalpel. Methodical, emotionless, exact. The estate clause in question was not only discretionary, he said, it was explicitly protective, language drafted by the late Robert Whitmore himself to ensure legacy integrity. Mrs. Whitmore acted within every legal parameter, including documented evidence of financial misrepresentation by the petitioner. Lauren's lawyer tried to pivot the tone. She was embarrassed publicly, he argued. A lifetime of parental neglect culminated in a humiliating financial betrayal. June didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just listened. When the judge asked if she'd like to respond, she rose slowly. The room quieted. "I didn't embarrass her," she said, voice calm and deliberate. "I simply stopped protecting an illusion. She told her story with filters. I offered the truth. Not loudly, not cruelly, just finally." She sat down. That was all. The ruling came 2 days later, filed electronically, time-stamped at 8:14 a.m., motion denied, executor rights upheld, no restitution due. Charles called her, his tone dry with satisfaction. "Everything stands. The foundation, the redirection, the new will, ironclad, no appeal likely to succeed." There was a pause, then softly, "You gave her a platform. She gave you silence." The next notification came not from the court, but from the board. Robert Whitmore Foundation, internal memo subject, access revoked, L. Whitmore. Effective immediately, Lauren Whitmore is removed from communications and decision-making processes for breach of transparency clause and internal confidentiality leak. June stared at the email, not with triumph, not with sorrow, with the kind of stillness that only comes after a long-awaited avalanche has finally hit the ground. She clicked the attachment. Lauren's name, once proudly listed as Legacy Representative Next Generation Steward, was now replaced with a line. Just a line. An absence shaped like a consequence. June folded her hands over her lap. The wind outside picked up, tugging at the garden wind chimes, sharp, dissonant, like metal arguing with itself. She closed the laptop. Not victory, just completion. Lauren is removed from Foundation Communications. She wanted to inherit aesthetics. I passed on something better. The conference room smelled of new carpet, faint lemon cleaner, and legal ambition. June sat at the long walnut table with her hands folded neatly, listening, not speaking, as three women from the Reclaim Initiative for Legal Equity explained what they did. Most of our clients are over 60, one said, adjusting her tortoiseshell glasses. Widows, women pushed out of family trusts, those whose names vanish from documents as fast as their husbands do. June nodded slowly. She didn't need examples, she had lived the footnotes. Across from her, a younger associate in a gray blazer leaned forward. "What made you choose us?" she asked. June looked out the window for a beat before answering. "I wanted to give something to women like me, but before the silence set in, before they're told they're too graceful to fight." The room fell quiet. Then the director smiled. Not politely, truly, like someone who understood the gravity of being seen and believed. "We don't normally name grants after individuals," she said, "but in this case, we'd like to propose something different. You're not just funding a program. You're redirecting an idea." From her bag, June pulled out the folder. The papers were already signed, her portion of the redirected estate assets, a 5-year endowment to support legal mentorships for women over 55 navigating financial erasure, probate exclusion, or inheritance manipulation. She slid the folder across the table. It made the smallest thunk, a quiet sound with permanent consequence. "I want it to be called the Whitmore Mentorship," June said. "But not just for him, for both of us." The director's eyebrows rose slightly. June reached into her clutch and unfolded an old photograph. She and Robert at their wedding, arms linked, laughing under a canopy of string lights. Behind them, the china glinted. Her bouquet was askew. He had lipstick on his cheek. The moment was imperfect and real. "He made sure I could do this," she added. "Now I'm making sure others won't have to ask permission." There was a beat of silence, then a shared inhale from the women across the table, as though they understood they weren't just accepting a donation, they were accepting a shift in legacy. 3 weeks later, the launch was held at a converted library-turned-legal commons in the city. No velvet ropes, no signature cocktails, just coffee, glass pitchers of water with lemon slices, and a standing-room-only turnout. Charles attended, quietly proud in a charcoal suit. Eleanor stood near the refreshments, smiling at everyone and refilling her own plate twice. There was a modest banner at the front, the Whitmore Mentorship Grant for Women Who Refuse to Vanish Quietly. A slideshow ran silently on the projector wall, photos of women who had benefited from early pilot programs, a 72-year-old grandmother who reversed a wrongful deed transfer, a former paralegal launching a community probate clinic. At the end of the loop came a new photo. June, standing beneath that same arbor where she'd been left out, now centered, now framed, now named, no hashtags this time. Just a caption. "Legacy is not what you leave behind, it's what you make undeniable." People applauded. She didn't cry, but her hand brushed once, lightly, over the locket at her neck. Robert's initials still engraved on the back. She'd never replaced the photo inside. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached her. "I lost control of my husband's will after he died," she said. "I didn't even know I had rights until I saw your photo." June's voice was quiet. "You still do." The woman nodded, eyes damp. "You changed the ending." June smiled. Then it was worth the rewrite. Later that night, the Foundation's new website went live. Header image, Robert's black and white portrait. Subheading, built in his name. Beneath it, June. Alive, strong, unedited. The Foundation launches with her husband's name and her face. She wanted pastels. I wore power. The black dress now lived in a preservation box, sealed in tissue and memory. It rested at the top of June's cedar wardrobe like an artifact, not of mourning but of momentum. Outside, her garden was in full, unscripted bloom. Nothing followed a color palette. The lilacs leaned into the roses, violet against crimson. Poppies tangled freely with soft yellow buttercups. The mint had spread far beyond its bed, brazen and unruly. She let it. It was early morning, sun not fully risen, dew clinging to petals, and the smell of earth and green life thick in the air. The kind of scent that reminded you things grow wild, no matter how many times someone tries to prune them into silence. June stepped barefoot onto the flagstone path with a cup of strong tea in one hand, the other brushing over the tops of lavender stems as she walked. The breeze pulled lightly at her linen robe. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called, a sharp, unapologetic sound. She paused by the wrought iron bench Robert had picked out years ago on a whim. "It's uncomfortable," he'd said, "but poetic." That had felt like a good enough reason then. Still did. She sat, balanced the cup on the armrest. In her lap was an envelope, cream-colored, handwritten, not calligraphy, not branded stationery, just thick paper, careful script, and a stamp already smudged by travel. She opened it slowly, slicing it with the silver letter opener Robert had once used on tax bills. Inside, "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Sharon Morales. I'm 63. I applied for the Whitmore mentorship after losing legal access to the home I helped build with my late husband. I'd never been in a courtroom before. I didn't think I had the strength to speak. But your name was in the pamphlet. And then I saw the photo. The one with you in the black dress. It made me think maybe we don't have to disappear just because someone else says we're no longer part of the story. I won my case last week. I kept the house. I have a garden. I have a... Now. You changed the ending. Thank you." Sharon June folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred. She rose, walked back into the house with the morning sun rising behind her, and stepped into her study, cool, orderly, lined with quiet decisions. She opened the drawer beneath the bookshelf. Inside, 2 items lay side by side, the thank you letter, and Lauren's original wedding envelope, never returned, never acknowledged, its seal still unbroken, its silence still loud. June placed Sharon's letter gently beside it, not as contrast, as clarity. One sent in power, the other held in avoidance. She closed the drawer softly, without ceremony. On the desk sat the framed photograph now used on the Foundation's landing page. She hadn't meant for it to become iconic, but sometimes truth takes shape without permission. The phone rang in the kitchen. She let it. The wind outside rustled the garden. She listened. Her dress remained boxed. But June? She was not. She stepped outside again, back into the blooming chaos of a garden that obeyed no themes. She let her fingers trail through stems that had never asked to be centerpieces. Her bare feet pressed into damp grass. She looked out over what had grown, wild, unfiltered hers. She said, "I ruined the aesthetic. I made sure it never repeated."